Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable chill in a place where no cold should be? A whisper of movement in your peripheral vision, only to turn and find nothing there. Some places hold echoes of the past, imprints of moments so intense they stain the very air we breathe. Tonight, we journey to the coast of Florida, to a tower that has guided ships for over a century, a beacon not just for sailors, but perhaps for souls who have never left. This is the story of the St. Augustine Lighthouse and the chilling cries of its ghostly children. The St. Augustine Lighthouse stands as a proud, black and white striped sentinel on Anastasia Island, its powerful light cutting through the darkest of nights. For paranormal investigator Alex Easton, it was more than just a historic landmark. It was a beacon of supernatural energy, a place stories clung to like barnacles on a ship's hull. He had been drawn to tales of disembodied giggles, of shadowy figures seen in the lantern room, and most disturbingly, of the sorrowful weeping that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the keeper's house. A sound many attributed to the tragic Pittee sisters. The history of the lighthouse is steeped in sorrow, a foundation built on more than just coquina and brick. In the late 1800s, during the tower's construction, tragedy struck the family of Hezekiah Pittee, the superintendent of the project. His daughters, Mary and Eliza, along with a young African-American girl, were playing on a railway cart used to transport building materials. What was a moment of innocent fun turned into a horrifying accident when the cart broke loose, plunging into the water and trapping the girls beneath. Only Pittee's youngest daughter survived the horrific ordeal. Alex arrived on a Tuesday, the sky a brooding canvas of gray that threatened rain. The air was thick with the scent of salt and damp earth, a smell that seemed to carry with it a certain weight, a heaviness that settled in his chest. He had brought with him his usual array of equipment: EMF meters, EVP recorders, and thermal imaging cameras. He had a reputation for debunking hoaxes, for finding the logical explanation behind the bumps in the night. But as he stood before the imposing tower, a sense of unease, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, began to creep over him. He began his investigation in the keeper's house, a beautifully restored Victorian building that stood in the shadow of the lighthouse. The interior was a museum, a snapshot of a bygone era, but beneath the polished wood and antique furniture, Alex felt a palpable sense of sadness. His EMF meter, silent until now, began to flicker erratically as he entered the children's bedroom. The air grew noticeably colder, the hair on his arms standing on end. He placed an EVP recorder on a small, child-sized rocking chair, its gentle creaking the only sound in the otherwise silent room. As dusk bled into night, Alex made his way to the lighthouse itself. The 219 steps of the cast-iron spiral staircase seemed to stretch on endlessly. each footfall echoing in the cavernous space. He paused on one of the landings, the silence of the tower pressing in on him. It was then that he heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the whisper of a child's laughter carried on the wind. He froze, straining to hear it again. But there was only the mournful cry of a distant gull and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, shaking off the momentary chill. He continued his ascent. The lantern room at the top offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the Atlantic, the lights of St. Augustine twinkling in the distance. He set up his thermal camera, hoping to catch any unexplained temperature fluctuations. As he scanned the room, a cold spot materialized near the window, a swirling vortex of blue and purple on the camera's display. The temperature in that spot had dropped a staggering 20 degrees in a matter of seconds, a phenomenon for which he had no logical explanation. Back in the keeper's house, Alex reviewed the EVP recording from the children's bedroom. He listened intently, the static hissing in his ears. Then, amidst the white noise, he heard it, a clear, distinct voice, a young girl's whisper saying, "Play with us." A shiver traced its way down his spine. It was the first truly unexplainable piece of evidence he had captured in years. A direct communication from the other side. The initial thrill of discovery was quickly replaced by a growing sense of dread. These weren't just echoes of the past. They were intelligent, interactive spirits. The following night, Alex returned to the lighthouse, this time with a more focused approach. He brought with him a collection of vintage toys, a porcelain doll, a set of wooden blocks, and a small, wind-up music box. He placed them in the center of the children's bedroom in the keeper's house. His cameras and recorders trained on them. He then sat in the corner of the room, waiting in the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. For hours, there was nothing but the creaking of the old house and the distant murmur of the ocean. Just as he was beginning to think the previous night's events were a fluke, the porcelain doll's head slowly, deliberately, turned to face him. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Then the wooden blocks began to stack themselves, one by one, into a small, unsteady tower. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. He could feel the energy in the room shift. A palpable sense of childish curiosity mixed with an undercurrent of deep, abiding sorrow. The entities were making their presence known, and their methods were becoming more and more direct. The climax of the second night's investigation came when the music box, untouched by human hands, began to play a tinkling, melancholic melody. The tune filled the small room, a haunting lullaby that seemed to echo the sadness that permeated the very foundations of the house. As the music played, a small, shadowy figure darted across the room, a fleeting glimpse of a child in a Victorian-era dress. Alex's thermal camera captured the anomaly, a child-sized silhouette that was degrees colder than its surroundings. The evidence was undeniable. He was not alone. Emboldened by his findings, Alex decided to attempt a more direct form of communication. On his third and final night, he returned to the base of the lighthouse, the place where the tragic accident had occurred. The air by the water's edge was colder, the sense of loss more profound. He set up his EVP recorder and began to speak, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He spoke of the Pittee sisters, of their tragic fate, expressing his sympathy and his desire to understand their story. As he spoke, a thick fog began to roll in from the sea, blanketing the lighthouse grounds in a ghostly shroud. The temperature dropped dramatically, his breath pluming in the suddenly frigid air. A child's weeping, faint at first, then growing in intensity, filled the night. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated grief, a cry that seemed to claw at his very soul. The weeping was all around him, a chorus of sorrow that seemed to emanate from the fog itself. It was the sound of lost children, forever bound to the place of their demise. Suddenly, the weeping stopped, replaced by an unnerving silence. Then a new sound emerged, the unmistakable creak and rattle of the old railway cart, the very instrument of the girl's death. The sound grew louder, closer, as if the cart was careening down the tracks towards him, an invisible harbinger of doom. Panic seized Alex, a primal fear that threatened to overwhelm him. He could almost feel the phantom wind of its approach, the ghostly rumble of its wheels on the non-existent tracks. He scrambled back, his flashlight beam cutting a frantic path through the fog. The sound of the cart grew deafening. Then, just as it seemed it would crash into him, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise that had preceded it. He was left standing in the cold, oppressive fog, his heart hammering against his ribs. The spirits of the Pittee sisters were not just content to whisper and play. They were capable of recreating the very moments of their traumatic end. Alex retreated to the relative safety of the keeper's house, his nerves frayed. He knew he was pushing the boundaries, venturing into territory that was both fascinating and dangerous. But he couldn't stop now. He had to understand the source of their pain, the reason for their restless haunting. He made his way to the basement of the house, a dark, damp space that had a reputation for being a hotspot of paranormal activity. The air in the basement was stagnant, heavy with the smell of earth and decay. He had heard stories of a shadowy figure that was often seen in the basement, a presence that was far more menacing than that of the ghostly children. Some believed it to be the spirit of a former lighthouse keeper, a man who had taken his own life in the tower. As Alex descended the stone steps, he felt a wave of despair wash over him, a feeling of hopelessness so profound it almost brought him to his knees. It was an emotion that did not belong to him, an intrusion from an outside, malevolent source. He set up his equipment in the center of the basement, the single beam of his flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. He called out, his voice echoing in the confined space, asking if anyone was there. The only response was the drip, drip, drip of water from the stone walls. Then a low growl seemed to emanate from the darkest corner of the room. It was not the sound of an animal. It was something guttural, something inhuman. Alex's blood ran cold. A large, shadowy mass began to form in the corner. A figure that was taller and broader than any man. It had no discernible features, just a void of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. Alex's EMF meter screamed, the needle jumping into the red. The temperature in the room plummeted. The cold, so intense it was painful. This was not the playful, albeit sorrowful, energy of the children. This was something else entirely. Something dark and malevolent. The shadowy figure began to move towards him, its form shifting and contorting as it glided across the floor. Alex was paralyzed by fear, his feet rooted to the spot. He fumbled for his camera, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He managed to snap a single picture before the entity was upon him. A blast of icy air hit him, knocking him off his feet. The last thing he saw before he lost consciousness was the terrifying, featureless face of the shadow looming over him. He awoke to the first rays of dawn, filtering through the small basement window. He was alone, his equipment scattered around him. He felt a searing pain on his chest and looked down to see 3 long, parallel scratches on his skin, the flesh red and raw. They were deep, angry wounds that could not have been self-inflicted. He had been attacked, not by the spirits of the children, but by the dark entity that shared their home. The chilling realization washed over him. The children weren't the only ones haunting this place. Shaken and injured, Alex gathered his equipment and fled the lighthouse grounds. He didn't stop until he was miles away. The black and white tower, a distant speck in his rearview mirror. The physical wounds would heal, but the psychological scars of his encounter in the basement would remain. He had come to scent Augustine seeking proof of the afterlife, and he had found it in the most terrifying way imaginable. He had also discovered that not all spirits are lost souls seeking peace. Some are malevolent forces that wish to do harm. Back in the safety of his hotel room, he reviewed the evidence he had collected. The EVP recordings were filled with the whispers and cries of the children, their voices a heartbreaking testament to their tragic fate. The thermal images showed the distinct, child-sized cold spots, and the video footage captured the fleeting glimpse of the girl in the Victorian dress. But it was the single photograph from the basement that haunted him the most. It showed the shadowy figure, a swirling vortex of darkness, with what looked like 2 glowing red eyes in the center of the mass. He knew he had to share his findings, to warn others of the dangers that lurked within the scent. Augustine Lighthouse, the stories of the playful ghost children, were only part of the story. a tragic prelude to a much darker and more sinister haunting. The malevolent entity in the basement was a threat, a powerful and dangerous spirit that seemed to feed off the sorrow and fear of the other entities and of the living who dared to venture into its domain. Alex published his findings on his website, a detailed account of his 3-night investigation, complete with the audio, video, and photographic evidence he had collected. The story went viral, attracting the attention of paranormal enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Some praised his courage and the compelling nature of his evidence, while others accused him of fabricating the entire experience. But Alex knew the truth, and he carried the physical and emotional scars to prove it. The St. Augustine Lighthouse continues to be a popular destination for ghost tour and paranormal investigations. Visitors still report hearing the disembodied giggles of children, the faint strains of a music box, and the sorrowful weeping that seems to echo through the keeper's house. Some have even claimed to see the fleeting apparitions of the Pittee sisters playing near the water's edge, forever bound to the place where their young lives were so tragically cut short. But there are also darker stories, whispers of a menacing shadow in the basement, of a cold that chills to the bone, and of a feeling of overwhelming despair that seems to emanate from the very stones of the foundation. Tour guides warn visitors to be respectful, to not provoke the spirits, for while the children may be playful, the other entity that resides in the lighthouse is anything but. It is a reminder that the world of the supernatural is not a playground, and that some doors are best left unopened. Alex never returned to the St. Augustine Lighthouse. The memory of his encounter in the basement was a constant, chilling reminder of the very real dangers of his profession. He continued his work as a paranormal investigator, but with a newfound sense of caution and a deeper respect for the forces he was dealing with. He had learned that the line between the living and the dead is a thin one, and that crossing it can have devastating consequences. The story of the St. Augustine Lighthouse and its ghostly children serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of grief. The cries of the Pittee sisters are more than just a ghost story. They are a tragic echo of a moment in time, a sorrowful lament that has been imprinted on the very fabric of the place. They are a reminder that some tragedies are so profound, their echoes can be heard for generations to come. And so the St. Augustine Lighthouse continues to stand as a silent witness to the past, its light a beacon for ships at sea, and its shadows a home for the souls who have never left. The giggles and cries of the ghostly children will forever be a part of its history, a chilling and poignant reminder of the tragedy that occurred there so long ago. And in the darkness of the basement, the malevolent shadow waits, a silent and menacing presence, a testament to the fact that some spirits are not at peace, and that some hauntings are very, very real. So the next time you find yourself on the coast of Florida and you see the black and white stripes of the St. Augustine Lighthouse against the darkening sky, listen closely. You might just hear the faint sound of children's laughter on the wind, a playful invitation to a game that has been going on for over a century. But be warned, for if you follow that sound, you may find yourself in the presence of something far older and far more sinister, a darkness that has made the lighthouse its home, and that has no intention of ever letting you leave. The lingering question remains: what is the true nature of the relationship between the spirits of the children and the malevolent entity in the basement? Are the children simply innocent victims, trapped in a cycle of grief? Or are they, in some way, connected to the darker force that resides there? Perhaps their playful energy is a mask for a deeper sorrow, a sorrow that the shadow entity feeds upon, growing stronger with each passing year. It is a question that may never be answered, a mystery that is as deep and as dark as the waters that claimed the lives of the Pittee sisters. And what of the future of the St. Augustine Lighthouse? Will the spirits ever find peace, or are they destined to haunt its halls for eternity? As long as the tower stands, it seems, so too will the stories of its ghostly inhabitants. The cries of the children will continue to echo through the night, a haunting reminder of a tragedy that time cannot erase. And in the shadows, the malevolent entity will continue to watch and wait, a silent and terrifying sentinel in the heart of one of America's most haunted places. The story of the St. Augustine Lighthouse is far from over. In fact, it feels as though it has only just begun.